All right, now this is just one of those kind of life discussion videos. So first off, I mean, if you aren't a Christian or don't like religion-based discussions, then this probably isn't the video for you. But thanks so much for clicking, and I hope you subscribe, because don't worry, it's kind of a once in a blue moon thing when I do these types of videos. But I was actually having a very good discussion with an old friend of mine this past weekend. I don't think we've seen each other for like 2 or 3 months, but me and him catch up on social media from time to time just to check in, see how life's going on, on both our ends. But we were having a good discussion, and we were talking about, religion. We're both Christians too, but we were just having a good discussion about whether or not going to church makes you a good Christian. And it was a very, very good, I think it lasted maybe about an hour and a half. We were just talking about it. And, we both went to Liberty University, and as you know, that's a private school, obviously Christian. And I was on campus, not counting online, but I was on campus from the spring of 2010 to the spring of 2014. And of course, I did online stuff. I'm not really counting my 3 years in the call center or my online where I did my master's and everything, but just specifically talking about my time as a residential student. Now, I got saved when I was 8, but I grew up in the church. Basically, I'm not exaggerating. I'm pretty sure you all, some of you all can relate to this, where, vacation Bible school during the summer, those usually lasted 3 to 5 days out of 1 week during the summer. Being in like Christmas and Easter plays, Black History Month things going on. But let's just break it down to like a monthly basis. Back in the day, I think it wasn't until high school or when I started college when my home church started doing 2 Sundays a month. Now, I know there are some churches out there that have church every Sunday, first, second, third, fourth, sometimes fifth, depending on what church and whatnot. But back in the day, in the Baptist church I grew up in, we only had church once a month. And when I talk about church, I'm talking about the actual service. That doesn't count like, choir anniversaries or senior citizens day or, special annual events. But we only had church once a month. And then when I think we went through a couple pastors, but then we eventually got 2, like second and fourth Sunday. Fifth Sunday was like the Sunday school union, where basically I think like several churches within the county I lived in back at home would go to one specific church for, the adult Sunday school, the youth Sunday school, and, representatives from each church would go up and speak, whether it be to sing a song, read scripture, tell a biblical story or preach or whatever. That was me. I was that guy telling the biblical stories, and that kind of helped me out with my public speaking skills, why I studied religion and whatnot at Liberty, and and history wrote itself there. And then we'll actually have a preacher come up for about maybe 20 to 40 minutes, depending on where the Spirit led, for a good sermon, and then we would leave. But yeah, getting to the meat and potatoes of it, after I got baptized when I was 8, that's when I really got into the church. And I mean, Sunday school every Sunday, youth choir, usher board, the Willing Workers, so many organizations back in the day. That was crazy. But basically, we went to church. I think going back to like Steve Harvey talking about the kings of comedy is like, well, I'm talking about I went to church all the time. I mean, all the time. Monday night prayer meeting, Tuesday night Bible study, Wednesday usher board meeting, Thursday young people meeting, Friday old people meeting, Saturday deacon board meeting, Sunday everybody meeting. It was kind of like that. And when I was young, and once again, like Steve Harvey like summed it up pretty well, like when you get churched so much as a kid, you don't like it, but then you eventually find something about it to make you want to go. That was me. Like I love the public speaking aspect. I don't think I did that until I was maybe 12 or 13. When I did my first speech like that. Not one of those Mother's Day poems or Black History Month poems or a Christmas play, but the very first time I got up and spoke, that was when I was, I think right when I turned 13. I loved it ever since, even though I'm an introvert. But you know, as time went on, you know, I really found my place in the church, you know, working on these different organizations. And then when I went to college, obviously Liberty University, and I've already done like a mini series about my time as a Liberty University student. I'll put a link at the end of this video. You can go through those. I still need to finish up. I've only done like 4 or 5 videos, but I still have more to tell. And I talked about my time during my first semester. I really felt my faith being challenged, you know, because to be honest, you know, between professors, because at Liberty, you know, professors teach from a biblical worldview. So it's almost like even if you're in a business class or a computer class or a math class, there's some biblical, you know, worldview sprinkled in there. And not to mention the convocations 3 times a week, the prayer groups, the campus church, which was optional. So it felt like, you know, with so many different people telling me different things, it's kind of like some people, to be honest, were seemingly using like their personal viewpoint rather than the biblical one. It almost felt like my faith was being challenged. And I remember the days when maybe like once or twice a month I would come home to visit, and I just didn't even feel like going to church, like, because I got churched out. And I mean, imagine that, but for 4 years, and then you don't really, I guess, not to sound lazy or just like give the easy answer, but it's almost like you don't want to go to church because of the fact, like, don't I get credit for going all those times? Like, maybe it's, I feel like at the core, looking back at it now, I just feel like because church was mandatory, like, you know, the 3 convocations each week, and, you know, curfew being at, and this for people that lived on campus, curfew being at 10, what was it, 9 or 10 p.m. I forgot the time, but basically you had to be on the hall at, I think it was 10. I think it was 10. I could be wrong. I forgot. It's been a while. Thank goodness. Where you had to be back on the hall for like the RAs to give the announcements. Then after that, you would break up into prayer groups, and those can run for God knows how long. And yeah, and you just got churched out. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. And I remember, like, after my first semester, when I finally went to church, like my home church, I felt relieved. Nothing against Liberty, because it's like a melting pot, but there's just nothing like a good old fashioned, you know, Black Baptist church choir singing and whatnot. Look, that's just my preference. That doesn't mean I haven't heard some great pastors from different ethnicities, but I remember on campus, like, when the Sounds of Liberty, which was a melting pot of races, I said races, in the same choir, it was just beautiful. But I'm just saying, like, it's almost like, you know, there's nothing like mama's home cooking. That's kind of how I feel about church, because I grew up in that Baptist church 10 minutes from, you know, 10 minutes from my folks' house. So that's what I'm used to. So, you know, it's just the fact that, you know, that's the foot stomping, tambourine, piano, and guitar. That's what I grew up with. You know, there's that soul factor in it now. Don't get me wrong, because, you know, at Liberty, you know, they did some hymns and whatnot. But at the same time, you know, sometimes it felt more like concerts due to, like, you know, the fogs machine and whatnot, and the big stage and the Vine Center, which was literally like an auditorium, like a huge stadium in a way. So I really love, you know, the small numbered Baptist church up the street. That's what I grew up with. So it was really good. And I love going to Thomas Road too. I really like that as well. But at the end of the day, I remember, like, you know, after I finished up school, moved out into an apartment, got a job. Yeah, I mean, once again, I remember, like, the first year or so in the call center, I worked 1 to 10 Monday through Friday, and I'm talking 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. I was spent. Like, I had no aspiration of waking up early during the weekend. That was literally me just finally catching up and being able to get me time. Because once again, being an introvert, and introverts listening to this can completely understand, when you're around people that much, not to mention on the phone for 40 hours a week, you need that time to recharge your batteries. And then from there, you know, go back for another week. Then as time went on, I got better shifts, slowly but surely. But, you know, and I know it's a bad, I think for a couple of years I was taking online classes as well. You know, I would use the weekend to catch up on homework, and it's almost like, you know, God, come on, please understand, I got to rest. I don't want to get up early on Sunday. But then, luckily I found several online streaming services that I will be watching. Like, even if I didn't wake up until like noonish, I'll be able to catch a sermon online, which is definitely convenient for those who aren't able to get out to church. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you're one of the elderly who really can't, get out like you used to. And, that's a great way to don't miss the sermon. And I feel like, at the end of the day, and once again, this is just my opinion, I think that you don't need to physically go to church to become a good Christian or be a good Christian. And I'm going to try not to sound as hypocritical as I can. I know we're almost 11 minutes and this is unscripted, just me talking off the top of my head, but also on my heart based off that discussion I had with that friend after taking so many classes at Liberty and whatnot, and just having good discussions, whether it be an essay or discussion board. It's really, and here's how I kind of look at it. When you're young and whatnot, and this goes for people who are new believers as well, no matter what age you come to the church. I'm just speaking from my experience because I was young when I went to church. I was forced to go to church and I hated it, like getting, whoopings and whatnot if I didn't want to get dressed, but then I eventually grew to like it. But I think that when you're young, and again, once again, I'm speaking from my experience as a youngin, when I was a youngin going to church, I think that church is a way to prepare you for life in terms of the spiritual aspect of it. And what I mean by that is, how to interact with others with love, how to find the God in anything, and one of the important parts about tithing as well. The way I saw it is, let's say if you don't have a home church, if you're almost like a church nomad, if you will, like you don't have a home church, but you visit, different churches whenever you can. When it comes to tithing, and this is not me questioning how much you should tithe or what the Bible says, that's not what I'm saying here. The way I kind of look at it is, if I don't go physically to a church, that my tithing is kind of like into the real world. Like, when it's Christmas and, the Salvation Army is outside of the store and you put a couple bucks in there or some change. Or when Thanksgiving and the cashier asks, hey, would you like to donate $1 or $2 or buy a canned food item for a family or homeless shelter during the holidays, or during back to school time where people are standing outside of a Walmart or Dollar Tree or Target, and it's like, hey, here's a little list, if you can get a few items off this list to donate to people who don't have school supplies. Giving to somebody who's in need, like charity. Like let's say you know someone who is out of gas, or I've had this happen before, like a stranger is in a parking lot asking for it. I'm very cautious now because nowadays you can't be too sure who rolls up on you, but if it's like, hey, I'm sorry, do you have like a couple spare bucks, so I can get some gas or something like that, and the list goes on. Like, to me, that's kind of like giving the tithing to the world. It's kind of like the charity, like, taking something because you have it, but then sharing it with someone who doesn't. And looking back, it really did relate to what I learned back in Sunday school and whatnot. And kind of like the little boy who gave the 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. I hope I got that number right. 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread to Jesus, and he took it and multiplied it for the multitude. And because this boy was so humble, he knew what was needed, but he offered all that he could, and then the Lord was able to multiply that and make it fruitful for everyone who was hungry. And it's really cool. I mean, like, even when you use the story where the rich man was asking how to go to heaven, and it was about giving up everything and following me. But I remember watching like Superbook and The Flying House back in the day, not the CGI, but I'm talking about the animated versions. And the rich man donated a bunch of money to the temple, but his maid was only able to offer a couple of coins, and she was scoffed at by some people. Like, how does she work in the home of such a wealthy man who gave like a bag of gold, but she's only able to donate 1 or 2 coins herself? But that meant more because she did that out of the goodness of her heart, because it was all she had, but she offered it to the Lord. Whereas this rich guy thought he could just buy his way into heaven. And that's how I kind of look at it, because if you give from your heart, no matter the amount, that's what really counts. So just those moments, because sometimes you never know, like the $1 or $2 extra you have in your pocket because, ooh, I went in Walmart and I spent everything, but I got a full tank of gas, bills are paid, I got all the groceries I need, so I got like $1.75 left. But then somebody comes up to you and they ask for, do you have any change, and you give it to them. That extra money just lying around in your pocket while you spent like $200 in a Walmart, that $175 could be worth $500 to that person who was in dire need and was humbled enough to ask someone for some help. So to me, even when I don't physically go to church and tithe, because sometimes I do, whenever I'm at home, I tried to tell my mom, like, hey, if you go to church this upcoming Sunday, here's a 20 or 40 or whatever, could you put that in for me? Sometimes I'm able to do that when I do have the extra funds, but then sometimes just the same thing, I feel like not in that, and there's a lot of times in those moments where I'm able to help someone in need, because I'm just so fortunate from, thank God that I have a couple extra bucks to spare that I'm able to give to someone else. In those moments, I don't really think about it until maybe later that day or something, like, hey man, it's like, yo, what you did, that small little thing meant a lot to another person. Same thing as, I know, just getting down to the nitty gritty, holding a door for someone who has a bag full of groceries, or maybe doing something as helping a friend with an assignment, whether it's reviewing something or whatever. It's just those little things like that. And I really, sometimes when those moments happen, once again, it's not until later on I have that self-reflection when I realize, you know what, I'm glad I went to church so much as a kid, because a lot of the things that happen in my life now, I look back and it's like, yeah, because I was raised right and I learned these lessons from such and such a person, or I learned this in a Sunday school, or maybe in a youth group. And those things really do pay off when you really think about it. Now, I also look at the aspect, because when I was growing up in church, there were a lot of older people, like in deacon board positions, senior choir, missionaries, and so on. And, like, I really think that in some cases, and again, this just isn't, I'm only speaking from my church, like I can't speak for everyone, but, based off the fact that they're older, more experienced, lived lives, and a lot of their testimonies, when they get up to pray or whatever, they talk about, how, I used to drink and club and all this stuff when I was younger, but then, I turned myself around. And a lot of them are like, I was young, my grandma, auntie, mama made me go to church. Then when I got older out into the world, I did things I shouldn't have, but then I got back into the church. So in a way, at least based off my experience, maybe there are people who went out there, did what they did, but then went back to the church in order to find redemption. And for, hopefully they weren't just blowing hot air, but they actually did live by, they don't just show up to church, but they live that kind of life even after they leave the church doors and come back in the next Sunday. But, that's a lot of people, sometimes they go out into the world, and I guess you could do, as Liberty would put it, go out into the secular world and do things that are against, what the Bible teaches. But then, later on they repent and then go back to church. But, there are people out there who just go to God when they want to kind of like get their, I guess you could say, wash the dirt of the secular world off and repent. But then once they realize everything is good, they go back to doing what they said they were going to stop doing. But I mean, hey, that's some people. But basically how I see it is that I looked at, just looking back, and once again, like I've been doing YouTube. What's today? It is September 17th. So it's been officially 11 months. Today marks 11 months since I've done YouTube full time. And during that time, I've been able to do a lot of self-evaluation. Why am I still single? Why haven't I found a right woman? Let's look at my eating pattern. What can I be doing to make myself healthier? What can I do to make this YouTube channel greater? What are my goals for the future? And just things like that. And that's great, being an introvert, but also having all this time on my hands is a great time for me to sit back, not necessarily go like, what's wrong with me, but let's see who I am, what I can do to be a better person, and things of that nature. And I really feel like that's really translated into my religion. Of course, I'm still a believer, but it's just really like me doing that reflection of how far have I come as a person and as a Christian? What can I be doing to strengthen my relationship with God? How did I get to this point? And the best part is, even though I love being independent, it's one of those things where I know for a fact I did not do it alone. And I really do like that about the self-evaluation there. And I really just begun to think that that being in the church for so long, growing up, it just makes me feel like, church in a way, not just Sunday school, but the church itself was a spiritual school or camp, if you will. And then when you, and I'm using air quotes here, graduate, just like college or high school, you go out into the real world, and it's pretty much taking everything you've learned and applying it to your life. And it is a really beautiful thing, because I mean, being born in 91 and growing up in the church, obviously times are different now than it was back then. As you get older in today's time, you're really being this goes for any religion, not just Christianity, but you're really being challenged, in the real world, like even so much as hanging out with friends or going out somewhere. The discussion of religion will come up in some capacity sometimes, and you got to be ready, to stand your ground and defend yourself. And I'm speaking like not physically or whatnot, but you really got to put on the whole armor of God when you leave your doorsteps nowadays, and not even your doorsteps, whether it's a phone conversation or something online. But it really is crazy to look at how the world is today. But it just lets me know that we really do need some soldiers out there. Because this battle for the Lord is really getting tough, I'm telling you. But at the end of the day, I really am glad that I was prepared when I was younger. But even better when you're older and you realize, like, everything I know so little, because I keep learning every day when it comes to this. But I will say that being out in the world, as opposed to going to church like 5 times a week, I really do feel like it hardens me to it in terms of, okay, like, I'm really getting experience how to become a better communicator of the word, how to engage in love instead of like being right. That's an important thing as well, because going to church is a great thing, but you need to take what you've learned and go out into the real world with it. Hence why, when Jesus taught his disciples and when Paul started establishing churches, it wasn't just about making like a safe haven, or I guess you could say being at Liberty so long, I've gotten used to the bubble, being in that Christian bubble. You got to go out there, you got to do the work, make those believers out there, go ahead and make the word known to those who haven't even heard it. And yeah, I mean, it really does speak volumes when you've been in church so long, you've learned so much, but realizing there's always more to learn, and that having all this knowledge means nothing if you don't do anything with it for the Lord. So yeah, I mean, I guess to round things out, as you get older and as you're a Christian, I feel like if there's anything, that drives me to go physically back to the church, it's the community aspect of it, being around people who are fellow believers, shaking hands, giving hugs, singing with the choir, in the audience, listening to the word. And ooh, there's nothing like when the preacher gets up there for the word and it feels like he's speaking just to you, like that message was something tailor-made by God just for you. That's a good feeling. But yeah, guys, I really did love doing this video, and like I said before, had a great healthy discussion with my buddy I haven't seen for a while. He has a home church. I believe he married someone that has a church in this area, and no, he actually is from Charlottesville, not Lynchburg, but he was in town for a few days, and we were just talking and catching up. But yeah, given the fact that his wife is involved with a specific church, that's where he goes now. But yeah, we had a good discussion, and we pretty much agreed on a lot of stuff. It's just the fact that being around like-minded people, being Christian and whatnot, it's almost like a recharging your spiritual batteries. It's kind of like, no matter, the world is full of ugly folks, and I'm not talking physically now. I'm talking like, the ignorance, the racism, the sexism, the politics, and everything in between. But to be around some fellow Christians, it just lets you know there are people out there who are good people, and you get charged up and you go out there to face another week. But yeah, so at the end of the day, personally speaking, I don't think that you have to go to church in order to be a good Christian. But I do feel like if you are curious about the religion, if you are a new Christian, I would highly recommend going to church, because it really does teach you a lot in order to face the world we live in today. And, I went to my church last month for homecoming, the annual homecoming. And, that was definitely great, seeing people I haven't seen for a while. And as of yet, I haven't found a home church here in Lynchburg. But like I said, I love streaming, you know, the Thomas Road service. And I got a friend that's the preacher of Windfall Baptist Church. And luckily enough, I think that's like 20 minutes from here. And luckily enough, there are people at his church who do like recordings for Facebook Live. So sometimes I sit up and, you know, I watch those services. Because remember, I grew up in a Black Baptist church. So sometimes those sermons can last like an hour plus. But, you know, luckily at Windfall, you know, it's like you know, my buddy, I used to work him at a call center. He's white, and those sermons usually last maybe 20, maybe 30 minutes, and I can just absorb that and go on. But, you know, I'm just playing, but I'm serious, so that's how it is. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I think this could lead to a healthy discussion. Let's keep it clean now. If you don't agree with somebody, that's completely fine, but just let me know in the comments. Do you feel like church is a requirement to be a good Christian? And let me know if you have any other, you know, non-Tyler Perry related topics you would like me to discuss. So again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I hope you have a wonderful week.